am Uju Asumpta, and I am delighted to bring you Marriage by Design, the podcast. Marriage by Design is a mentorship program I designed to demystify marriage, to create awareness, and help Christian men and women understand marriage and see it for what it is, to receive the blessings that it holds. You know, most people want to get married, but not everyone understands the meaning and foundation of marriage. For a business to thrive, you must make research, read, and ask questions to understand the pros and cons of business, that particular business, so that you will succeed. But most people seek to rush into marriage rather than learn more about marriage, even when they see the rate of marriage breakdown in our society rising every day. So while people have little or no knowledge about marriage, except for what they know growing up or what they see growing up, they feel ready and prepared for marriage, no matter how old you are or how young you are. But my focus today is on the meaning of marriage. What is marriage? What is your perception about marriage? When I was preparing for this discussion, for this conversation between you and I came across this definition of marriage by Oxford Dictionary. And it says that marriage is the legally or formally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship, historically and in some jurisdictions, specifically a union between a man and woman. But when you look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it defines marriage as the covenant by which a man and woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life, which is ordered by its nature to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring, and which has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament between the baptized. My focus today is not just on several definitions people have about marriage. I want to focus on the Catholic definition of marriage. When you go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, you see the rich content that we have about marriage. And sometimes I feel that young people don't read about these things earlier in their lives, and it causes a lot of problem, because whatever you know about something gives you the insight on how to practice it. It gives you the insight on how to deal with it. So my focus is on the definition of marriage, by the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is extraordinarily rich and powerful in its truth. This definition should not be studied or looked at just by Catholics. I find this very useful also for every Christian. It is very important for us to look into this, discuss it, understand God's intention for marriage, so that it helps us to enter into union with the other person, having a full knowledge of what God wants us to do, who God wants us to be. You cannot enter into something without knowing what it's all about, which is basically the mistake most people make. Imagine how many years Catholic priests spend in a seminary. They go through a lot of formation to become who they are at the end of the day. I feel that is still the amount of time that is needed to research, read, understand, pray, to be able to discern and understand God's intention for marriage. So that when you get to that stage in your life where you're putting marriage as your priority, where you feel that you're ready to get married, you do it and do it right. You can imagine, with all the assumptions people hold about marriage, none will make sense if we choose our personal ideas and beliefs over God's intention for marriage. When you come this side, oh, culture said this about marriage. Oh, culture said that about marriage. Oh, individuals express their own perception about marriage. And most of these things are things that are programmed into us while we are growing up. You only know a thing because of what you see or what you perceive or what you know. It takes divine intervention to discern things of the spirit, things that are not just man-made. And marriage is not man-made. We're still going to come to that in our next episode. So some people might, argue that the origin of marriage, they might give it to culture. But before culture, before the people that practice culture, God, our creator, the creator of the universe, was. And this calls for a deep reflection about marriage and God's intention for marriage. This is the kind of discussion I want young people to begin now to have. Not just young people, young men and young women, but also parents, because most of the time the parents also play a key role in leading their children into marriage. So it is important that we as a people, not just as a Catholic, as Christians, begin to read more about marriage, God's intention for marriage, God's plan for marriage. Before you get desperate about getting married, before you start praying and fasting, whether you're the one that wants to get married, you're the man, or you're the woman, or you're a parent that you want your young daughter to get married, before you do all of that, you must first understand God's intention for marriage. You must understand the ground rules for marriage. I'm going to leave you today to reflect on what marriage is. Make research. Listen to what people have taught about marriage, especially from the perspective of being a Christian, from the perspective of being a Catholic. Go to Google. Check out a lot of Catholic documents. The Catechism has it all. Like when you read the lines, and we're still going to come back to touch on that. When you read the lines, they are all spelled out. And the question I keep asking myself, everything written here, is that what we're practicing? If it is not what we're practicing, it means that, we have a certain belief coming from our culture. And if a culture is not going to make me better, if a culture is not going to promote an individual, then it's time for that culture to be changed. So even amongst Christians, even amongst Catholics, we're still struggling, we're still at the infant level, where we are struggling to understand the basics of marriage, what God intends. And when I say this, I don't even mean just as a young girl. Even those who are doing marriage classes, most of the time they think they know. But it takes the grace of God, it takes intentionality. You intend to know, and God will show you. God will show you the truth. God will reveal to you what He intends for marriage, so that when you do it right. I want to read again the definition of marriage by the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It says that marriage is the covenant by which a man and woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life, and which is ordered by its nature to the good of the spouses. I buttress this point, the good of the spouses. If a relationship is not for the good of the man and the good of the woman, what is the essence of it? We cannot keep witnessing the killings by, husbands to their wives or their wives to their husbands. A lot of things happening in homes that children even witness. We cannot keep on watching without doing anything. It is time for us to ask ourselves the big question: what is God's intention for marriage? Catholic Church has it there, even before you were born. So it is important that we look at these things. It says, by its nature, to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. So if the coming of togetherness between the man and the woman is for the good of the both of them, for procreation and the education of the offspring, the education of the children you're going to bring into this world. How can you pray you want to get married or fast or feel bad and get frustrated because you're not finding your life partner when you have nothing inside you in the first place to teach your offspring when you have them? I've asked these questions like over and over again, and I'll keep asking this question: what qualifies one to get married? What qualifies a man to be a father? What qualifies a woman to be a mother? Is it just the mere fact that you're able to bring a child to the world, or the fact that you have a role to play that you ought to prepare even before you enter into that marriage? That's why I'm saying that we ought to prepare ourselves. And with all the chaos we have around us, it's no longer just the young people. It's no longer just the young man and the young woman that need to research and go deep to understand God's intention for marriage so that you do it and do it right. But also our parents. You've got to research for all this. When you have exams to write in your office, you're going to be promoted, you get prepared, you go on the internet, you research for the possible questions that you will be asked, you get ready, and you do well and get promoted. So it is also time we invest our time, our energy into knowing God's intention for marriage, God's plan for marriage. This would help us a lot, so that when people enter into marriage, even when they start having crisis, they understand what they are there for, and God enters this covenant with us when you're getting married. So definitely God will not leave you alone at that moment. So it makes the burden less, because you understand in the first place what you're doing. So you know that you have to turn to God, back to God, to heal you or help you out in your marriage. The more you know about something, the more you gain understanding about it, and the more you will be better at it. Join me again next week on Marriage by Design. God bless you. Bye.